Sitting in my car outside of the school, I wait. I can feel my nerves eating at me as I wait to see what emotion my daughter will be wearing. Counting this will be her third primary school. Every time she goes to one, she always gets tormented by bullies and teachers who don't watch out for her. And right now, I'm just praying this one works out for her. As the school bell rings and a flood of children pour out the doors, I watch eagle-eyed looking for my daughter. As the wave of tiny people disperses, I see my daughter, pigtails bouncing with her pink bag on her back, with a large smile spread across her face. Seeing that makes me smile. There is finally hope that she has found a school that she actually likes. As she runs to my car and opens the door, I turn to look at her and ask, "How was it, sweetheart?" In her bubbly tone, she replies,
"I loved it."
Hearing this makes me smile even wider, so I ask, "So there wasn't anyone who was mean to you?"
"Nope,"
she replied.
"I made a friend."
"Really? What's their name?"
"His name is Terry. When I was sitting alone on the playground, he came up to me and said hi."
Hearing that my baby was just sitting alone on the playground didn't come with a good feeling, but it didn't surprise me. Haley was always a shy girl, and that had only gotten worse after the bullying. But after hearing that she made a friend, I looked past it and told her to continue.
"After he said hi, he started talking to me. He's pretty funny."
"How so?" I asked as I started to drive away.
"Because he talks like an adult. Like he uses all kinds of big words and stuff. Like
Do you mean indubitably?
Yeah, that's the one. It's like he's from a science show. He was talking about all kinds of stuff, like physics and matter manipulation. I didn't understand a lot of it, but he said he could show me."
"Oh, really now?" I said with a chuckle. "So what did he do?"
"He picked up a stick and started to move it around his feet. All of a sudden, the grass started to move and stuff without the stick even touching it,"
she said excitedly. "Wow, he sounds really interesting," I said, playing along with her story of Terry's wild imagination. As I pulled into the driveway, she continued to talk about her new friend and all the fantastical things he showed her as I embraced the wild nature of a child's imagination. When we got to the door, she continued saying,
"Oh yeah, the best part! He showed me how to do one of his magic tricks."
As she ran inside, she flung her backpack off of her back and started to rummage around inside of it. Yanking out a book and flipping it open, she tore out a page and started to fold it. Before I knew it, she was holding an origami bird. "Is that the trick?" I asked.
"Of course not, Mom. This is."
As she said this, she held the bird in one hand and hovered her other hand over it, then moved it up and down slowly. Suddenly, the wings started to move, then it popped up out of her hand and fell to the floor. I jumped a little, not expecting the sudden motion, and gave her a round of applause, then asked, "How did you do that?" She gave me a chuckle and said,
"It's a secret. Terry said I was a natural and that one day I would be great at magic. But it stinks, though. When Terry did it, his bird flew into the sky. Oh well, I'll just have to practice more."
"Terry's probably right," I said. "You've only been there a day and you're practically Houdini. Now wash up, dinner will be ready soon." And with that, she ran to her room carrying the origami bird. That night, as I lie awake thinking about how this school seems to be the right one for my daughter, her little origami trick always seemed to creep into my mind. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out how she had done it. I lied awake in my bed for what felt like hours trying to figure it out, until the dark embrace of sleep slowly consumed me. Over the next few weeks, Haley would come to love her school. Every day she would come home and tell me about the things that she learned, some of it about schoolwork, and a lot of it magic that she learned from Terry. Now, up until this point, I assumed that everything she had learned was sleight of hand and just the playful imagination of children. But my perspective would soon change in the coming days. As I parked my car in front of Haley's school, I sat there waiting for the bell to ring. It was the usual pattern that I'd gotten used to over the last couple of weeks, and right on time, as usual, the bell let out a resounding holler. once again a swarm of laughing children flooded out of the front doors and slowly dispersed. Children either running to their parents' cars that patiently awaited them, or others ran around playing with friends whose parents hadn't come to pick them up yet. Still waiting in my car, it surprised me that I hadn't seen Haley yet. First 5 minutes went by, then 10, and it was slowly creeping up to 15 minutes when I decided to just go in the school to get her. Making my way to her class, I walked down the halls, looking at all of the arts and crafts created by the children. Finally, standing in front of the door, I looked through the little glass window to see Haley, sitting at her desk speaking to someone. It was a little boy, but from the way he was dressed and was carrying himself, you wouldn't think that he was. He was in a tailored navy blue suit, with matching shoes and a silver tie that pulled the outfit together, all while sporting thick-rimmed spectacles. He was standing at the chalkboard, piece of white chalk in his hand, looking like a miniature version of a teacher. The board was covered in indescribable scribbles. Most of it was incoherent, but some of it looked as if it wanted to be a language. As he gestured to the board, seemingly to explain what he was writing, Haley had her book open, jotting down every word that he said. The entire scene was odd, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, I wanted to think it was harmless, but on the other hand, it was kind of unnerving. The suit, all the scribbles, and the lack of teacher in the room was off-putting. After taking in the entire scene, I slowly raised my hand up to the doorknob, twisting it and pushing it open. The hinges made a shriek as it opened, and both of the kids' heads snapped in my direction as I made my way into the classroom. When my daughter saw me, her face lit up with a smile and she said,
"Hi, Mom."
"Hi, sweetheart. Sorry, but we have to leave. I've got to get back home and do some things around the house." She made a pouty face but started packing up her things.
"Oh yeah,"
she said,
"you finally get to meet Terry."
Looking over to the boy in the expensive-looking suit, he had already started making his way towards me. When he arrived in front of me, he caught me by surprise. He held out one hand and waited for me to shake it. Taking his hand and shaking it, I was surprised once again by the strength of his tiny hand. That's when he spoke.
"It's so nice to finally meet you, Miss Parker. I see where Haley gets her beauty."
I'll be honest, I was a little caught off guard by that, and it made me stutter a bit when I responded. It's nice to meet you also. I've heard a lot about you." Without missing a beat, he responded.
"I know. Well, I guess it's time for Haley to go. I'll see you tomorrow, Haley. Now, don't forget what I taught you."
Making our way out of the school and into the car, I looked back at the open school doors, and there he was, standing in the frame, one hand behind his back, and the other doing a gentle wave goodbye. As we drove home, I would constantly take glances back at Haley in the rearview mirror, and the entire drive, she had her head tilted down, staring into her book, like it was a void into the abyss. When we got home, she made a beeline for her room before I could say anything to her. Wondering if something was wrong, I followed her. Knocking on the door, I asked if everything was all right. She responded with a,
"Yeah, Mom, everything's fine."
Unsure if she was being 100% with me, I gave an uneasy, "Okay, sweetie, dinner will be ready soon." Moving on, I went to work. About an hour later, I was done with dinner and everything else I had to around the house. I called out to Haley, telling her dinner was ready. After a few seconds without a response, I called out to her again, and once again I got no response. Moving down the hallway, I approached her door. Raising one hand, I let out a series of raps on the wood. No answer. Knocking harder, I called her name, and I still got no response. Putting one ear to the door, I could hear what sounded like mumbling and the faint sound of things rumbling. Unsure of what was going on, I announced, "Haley, open the door now or I'm busting in!" I stood there waiting, but once again I got no response. Steadying myself, I tilted my body so that my shoulder was facing the door. I wasn't a big woman, nor was I above average strength. but I was worried that something was wrong with my daughter, and there was no chance in hell that some flimsy piece of wood would stop me from getting to my daughter. Taking a few steps back, I ran at the door, slamming my shoulder into it. Instantly, a shrill pain spread through my shoulder, and I knew that it was going to bruise, but I pushed past it and slammed the door again. This time I heard a crack, and I knew that this barrier wasn't going to hold me back much longer. After 3 more hits, my arm felt like it wanted to fall off, but there was a sizable crack next to the doorknob. One last time I flung myself at the door. The door flew open, and my momentum carried me with it. Stumbling and almost falling flat on my face, I caught myself. And what greeted me was a sight that I would never forget. Haley was in the middle of her room, to be exact. She was floating about 5 feet off the ground in the middle of what looked like a more complex version of a pentagram, with her eyes rolled back while mumbling something incoherent. Everything else in her room was shaking and rattling, and some smaller items were even floating. The scene was horrifying. Stunned, I slowly made my way towards her, calling her name all the while, but getting no response. When I got to the edge of the pentagram, I stopped, taking my eyes off my daughter and looking at it. I could feel a macabre presence billowing off of it. The symbol made me rethink what I was about to do. It filled me with doubt and fear, making my legs tremble and my heart skip a few beats, as though it was daring me to attempt something, begging me to try to save my daughter, to see what would happen. Somehow I managed to stop staring at it for long enough to look back at my daughter. Seeing her like that made me so scared that I wanted to cry, but I stopped myself. Finally building up some courage, I raised my hand and started to move it towards Haley. As soon as one finger moved past the first line of the pentagram, my finger started to burn. The most intense heat that I've ever felt surrounded my finger. Instinctively, I pulled it back and cradled my hand. Looking at the tip of my finger, expecting for the flesh to be burned away, I was surprised to see that it was fine. Realizing this, I knew what I had to do. Raising my hand once again, I pushed it past the first line of the pentagram. The heat, the pain instantly attacked my hand, consuming it. I let out a scream that would leave my throat in pain for the next week. Pushing further, my entire arm was now across the barrier, and the pain only seemed to get worse. But it wasn't enough. I still couldn't seem to reach Haley. Leaning forward more, my face crossed the line of the pentagram. The pain that I felt, I assumed, could only be compared to having acid thrown in your face, or having the skin peeled from your bones. It almost made me faint. But right as I was about to pass out, my hand wrapped around Haley's wrist. Realizing this, I yanked. Since Haley was floating, it was easy. She glided out of the circle and fell into my arms, motionless. I called her name repeatedly, shaking her, trying to get her to stir. All of a sudden, her eyes rolled back, and I could see her sparkling blue eyes. After she caught some of her bearings, she asked me what happened. I explained as much as I knew and asked her how she felt. She said she felt fine, but I still wanted to get her checked out. The only problem being, I didn't know if I should take her to a doctor or a priest. After deciding that a doctor should probably be the best choice, I took her, and thank God I did. They said that she was severely dehydrated and that she had to stay in for a while. After trying to get some sleep and failing, I realized that it was already day, and it was about the time that Haley should have been in school. Then it hit me. The root cause of this whole thing was that demon child, Terry. Driving up to the school, already ready to wait for the bell to ring so that I could approach that little bastard, I was surprised, but yet not, when I saw Terry sitting under the tree in front of the school, with his legs crossed, seeming as though he was waiting. I hopped out of my car and made my way towards him. As soon as I got within 5 feet, he spoke.
Took you long enough. I've been waiting out here for ages.
Angered by his cavalier attitude, I began. Now listen here, you little
Language, Miss Parker. This is a school.
I don't ever want to see or hear about you speaking or associating with my daughter. I don't know what you are, but whatever you've been teaching her, I don't want it around my house, and especially around my daughter. After staring at me for a few seconds, he let out a soft chuckle, then turned on his heels and began to walk away. Where are you going? I shouted after him.
Well, I am at school, so gotta get back to class.
He said it all in the same cavalier tone, and it filled me with anger. I stared after him. As soon as I did, he looked back at me, and I froze instantly. There was something there. Something in his eyes that told me if I chased after him, I would meet a most unpleasant end. It was something like looking at the pentagram, but so much worse. With that, he gave me an over-the-shoulder smirk and walked back into the school. And that's when I was sure that this was no little boy. After a few days in the hospital for her dehydration, Haley was able to come home. I was already making plans to take her out of that school, and she said that she had gotten rid of all the books she had used to write down everything Terry had taught her. But she said that she still remembered everything also. She said it was like as if it was tattooed on the inside of her brain. That worried me greatly. At dinner, Haley was quiet and reserved, not really answering my questions. The only one she did answer was when I asked her what the ritual was. She said that it was a summoning ritual. I asked her what she was summoning, and all she said was,
Him.
After that, she wouldn't answer any more of my questions, so I left her alone. After dinner, Haley washed up and went to bed, walking into her room unabated thanks to the broken door which I had forgotten to get fixed. I asked her if she would be okay. She nodded her head in the positive, and I kissed her goodnight. That night, once again, sleep would not come to me. I'd lay in my bed with my eyes closed, tossing and turning, trying to drift off. But I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried. So I resigned myself to just lie there. Then I got a feeling that eyes were on me. I could feel a cold sweat break out on my forehead and my heart rate quickened. It was as though my body was reacting to something my mind had not yet noticed. That's when I opened my eyes, and I looked at the foot of my bed. There he was! Terry was standing there staring at me in his tailored suit, with a look of malice in his eyes, with the moonlight coming through the window, hitting him just right to make the scene even more terrifying. I pitched up, crawling backwards away from him, staring at him. I couldn't think of anything to say, and even if I did, it felt as though my throat was in knots. I didn't have to say anything, though, because he spoke first.
I was willing to leave you alone, willing to let this go, but after I realized how important Haley was, I just couldn't let this slide. Not only did you disrespect me in front of that stupid school, you're planning to take away my star pupil. You probably don't even know how special your daughter is. Of course you don't. You know why you can't tell? Because you can't see it. I've been waiting so long for someone like her, and I can't let this chance slip away.
As he spoke, his face seemed to age and warp. His eyes went from a light gray to a void-like black, and the shadows around the room seemed to crawl up the walls. And as soon as I thought he was about to end me, he vanished. A few seconds later, a blood-curdling scream that I would never forget as long as I live ripped through the house, and it came from Haley's room. Jumping out of bed and running down the hall, I practically flew into her room, only to find it empty, and a note on her floor that had written in eloquent handwriting, "She's mine now."
Hello once again. To start, I'd like to thank MD Who Entertainment for narrating the larger part of the story. It's nice to have another collab on my channel, and she did a great job with the narration. It would be amazing of you if you were to stop by her channel and drop a sub and a like if you haven't already. She makes great content and original stories, so if you like my channel, you're more than likely to like her content. Anyway, with that being said, if you liked the video, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. And don't forget to come back next time when I bring you another tale from a world much like your own.